Tene tatanda ngarange tangbo chenamba kangala tahideli chuchuta tene tate jeso tatanda ngaranso chutingo undse na chuni partuke sumba pardola namba yep na ne tene sumba chuni partuke pardohi pekabre la tene chuni pardo te ya tak kasing kapsu kari hyubarese na chitang chutang chi tongni imbag no hartang rabote tongni ta choja chimbo ta dewarhi bingu ngo de ye hisena yanda ta de chartang de chitang tongni ngoni chartang de hyubarela tene te ya tang aranso no hi go on de se na jerdo number hi ba chu je number hiba chu jiga zawa de kandelesena kungi number hiba kungi number hiba sinkin de kandel sege yoresena ngaranzo ta number hiba yenda ge konso mato ba jitang tu jendo ngaranzo ronai ndonai sanai nyenai salhin ripi ge cha zam hi zani manga bala tene tate nege yorela te kungi number hiba tene ta kungi number hiba ti ngo de kande chi yoresena ngo rangin chi tomba tene ngo rangin chi salwa salton sondun juba chi nelu te ta ye nelu ontsena tende yore te yinaya kungi ti ngo te salwa te harayon kapsala teni salwate kharwala teni tongchate ngui mazin bache tongchate ngui mazin bache ne teni trubate yunga yore truba sedu tendam chuni ga ondasina trubare kunzo nungsul ga ondasina koran salware koran salne chasang nongwaji kharga yore mato te marikba no tome nambala yomare trul sedu teni salvo je kharga yore la salvoji harwala tene teni tela tene ti salcha tela tombo ngoma hibaje teni te jinji teni ngame bala ngaran zambe nyemo be te chang tain dei se tati nyemo be tela rangin ke dot zambe ke namba ngaran so tena yonda madena yonda nganzen tamshige wate takwa ye bala tene nyemo be te chang nyemon be ye tan kungi number hiba ni de la tembe number hiba sungi yorela ta ti number hiba chu chu de la matembe number hiba sungi yore ta ti tembe number hiba no ne tini matemba njuhi number chu chu sege yorela chu chu de charon de la tini ta mega number hiba mega ombola tini mega number hibi zu thong nawe ombola tini nawe number hibi ke datu nae ombola tini nae number hibi ke tetsor tini jei ombola tini jei number hibi ro nyong luji ombola tini tate luji number hibi riza nyong te tate la go ngai number hiba kasete ke namba tabu jei ta tini te tomi ke namba ta tsemaga ondasena tochi to tomi namba niga nune tomi ki namba se teni tate koran hyar zam tong zam de mato tela yakbor zamba ta dubor zamba namto hira yomarela yakbor zamba number toba to dubor zamba number toba te ta number toba tochi sege yore tochi sedu ye tochi sedu teni ye tochi tige tene ngune ge no zamain ba salbur nong yo mari yi la tenki tsuji kharwari meg number hibi je suji ne zo tenki tsuji number la kharne tene te la number to pa mambo ya bota dubu ge nong to mambo je te yen da na number hibi je suji ne tene ta te dal sangin ge nong to tene trazangin ge nong to la so pata tende number topa jiba tela tupa hiti number hiba si ta te dambe ge number hiba tsu chou yorela tsu chou te tangpo ken yige teni chu ji yenji nelu tongcha te ngui ma zingba che teni tela teni marik pen chol tela teni dadan zayin tela teni number hiba tsu chou Teni Jovati Sone, Tan Jitin Diggin on the Chasanji Hargior. Teni Tatella, Jitin Diggin on the Chasanji Harry undu tella. Teni Takandi Younger na. Teni Tatella. Teni Takarlamto, Malam Jacapsala, Teni Rimbayintala, Susu Chorwanda Botiuntu, Tambo, Gong number hipate, Taki number hipamondo, 10. Gong I number hipate, Teni Niemobi, Gong number hipata, each number hipate, Teni number hipala, 10. Teni Karlam Jacapsala, Niemobi, the number hipala, 10. Teni Tati Nalam Jacapsala, Kimaripe Chatia, Ransar Tem, Tatu Sarchanaboti, Singani, Teni Tati Chuchi Engine Mondo, Negiorella, Tatella Ye Salse, Cassing Hubati, the Tiquarel, Ye Salse Nayanda, they were keeping Bosinayanda, Tati Captainal Hargiore, Hargiore te Yenaya, Teni Tatanda. Tenete Naransoli yet demani yep nelo de tan truchati te sur doyung captainala Sharium Riore Truchati doyung castle Sharium Riore de Yenaya Tenetela Comchamena tating on the la Netugio Marella teacher na Teni tati Tanda Ye Western Simbersipic Chertula Teneta Kandi Gogresena Tatanda Jene Bartol Nepe Captainala. Tene Nyamni Yapoje Yapa Nyamni Yapu Yapa Tea Te Motella Tene So Zum Lam Zum Sharva Maimba Tene Hinig Tingens and Latine Tencha Yapa Salcha Yapa Tatende Jig Gomte Culture.
Good morning to you all. We are currently concerned with the third of the 4 intervals, that is to say, the interval of Dharmata. And yesterday I explained how at the beginning of the interval of Dharmata, the emptiness of all things, of all dharmas, appears to the person who has just died. What appears at that time is the ground. You can call it emptiness, you can call it Buddha nature, you can call it Mahamudra. Essentially, it is what is called the ground wisdom. Now, what actually has happened to cause this to appear? As we have discussed, our minds consist of 8 consciousnesses, 8 types of consciousness. The root of all of these is the 8th, which is called the all-basis consciousness. The all-basis consciousness is continuous. It is functioning whether you are walking or sitting, whether you are talking or eating, in fact, whether you are awake or asleep. The all-basis consciousness is that mere cognitive lucidity, that mere lucid awareness that is not comprised by the functions of the other 7 consciousnesses, but that underlies them. Now, the nature of the all-basis consciousness is at the same time empty and lucidity. It is emptiness and it is lucidity. So it's often referred to as the unity of emptiness and lucidity. The problem is that when the lucidity of the all-basis consciousness arises, we don't recognize the emptiness. And that is the start of bewilderment. When, because of the intensity of the all-basis's lucidity, we fail to recognize its emptiness. Now, bewilderment is, in a sense, an active state, because the bewilderment is itself a function of that lucidity. Admittedly, an aberrant function, it is nevertheless a function of that lucidity itself. So bewilderment is not mere unconsciousness. It is a type of lucid function. The first moment of bewilderment is the absence of recognition. The absence, in the midst of the lucidity, the absence of recognition of the emptiness. The next moment is when, in the absence of that recognition, we mistake that which is not I, that which is not a self, to be I, to be the self. That second stage of bewilderment is the arising of the seventh consciousness, the consciousness which is mental affliction, or the afflicted mental consciousness. The afflicted mental consciousness is that underlying apprehension of a self that is, like the all-basis, continuous. Whether we are consciously thinking about the self or not, there is an always present fixated apprehension of the self, and that is the seventh consciousness. So these two consciousnesses, the all-basis consciousness and the afflicted mental consciousness, are called stable consciousnesses or unfluctuating consciousnesses because they function continuously. The six consciousnesses that arise from these, however, are called fluctuating consciousnesses or unstable consciousnesses because they arise and cease in response to contact with their individual or respective objects. The first five of these are the sense consciousnesses. The eye consciousness, in reliance upon the eye faculty, experiences visible forms. The ear consciousness, in reliance upon the ear faculty, experiences audible sounds. The nose consciousness, in reliance upon the nose faculty, experiences smells. The tongue consciousness, in reliance upon the tongue faculty, experiences tastes. And the body consciousness, in reliance upon the body faculty, experiences tactile sensations. These five sense consciousnesses, while they are fluctuating, are at the same time utterly non-conceptual. They do not and cannot in any way think or appraise their objects. They merely see, hear, smell, taste, and feel, respectively. They cannot and do not think about their objects, such as recognizing them as one thing or another, or thinking of them as good or bad, and so on. The sixth fluctuating consciousness, the mental consciousness, does not directly see the objects of the senses. What it experiences is an abstraction or a generalized image that it produces based upon the sense impression received by one of the sense consciousnesses. So the sixth consciousness will generate a generalized image of, for example, what the eye consciousness has seen, and so forth. In addition to that, the sixth consciousness functions conceptually to think about these generalized images, think of them as one thing or another, think of them as good or bad, and so on. Now, all six of these consciousnesses result from the all-basis consciousness's absence of recognition of its own emptiness. To start with, the mind does not recognize its own emptiness, overpowered by its own lucidity. And then it misapprehends itself as a self, which is the beginning of the seventh consciousness. And from that arise the six consciousnesses, and from them all of the appearances of this world. Now, what happens to these consciousnesses during death? The first consciousnesses to cease functioning during the dying process are the five sense consciousnesses. As the sense faculties cease their functioning, the consciousnesses that rely upon them stop arising. And then during the inner dissolution, white appearance, red increase, and black attainment, the other consciousnesses gradually become dormant as well. After the five sense consciousnesses have dissolved back into the all-basis consciousness, the sixth consciousness, the mental consciousness, dissolves into it. During the first of the three stages of the appearance, increase, and attainment, during the white appearance, the seventh consciousness, the afflicted mental consciousness, dissolves back into the all basis. And at the end of the third of these stages, at the end of black attainment, the all basis in its ignorant aspect, the all basis consciousness as a state of ignorance, becomes briefly non-functional. It is not purified. What happens is there occurs a gap in its functioning. And this gap, where none of the eight consciousnesses as bewildered functions are functioning, allows for the appearance of the ground luminosity, the ground clear light. So the ground clear light appears at that moment, which is the first moment of the Bardo of Dharmata, because the consciousnesses are temporarily in abeyance. But although they are temporarily dormant, they have not been eradicated. So if the ground clear light is not recognized, all of the bewilderment will gradually re-arise. And this is why we need so much to practice in this life during this interval between birth and death. And practice here, familiarization with the ground clear light, has to be much more than a mere glimpse of it through direct introduction. The glimpse of the ground clear light that students have through direct introduction is not sufficient in order to produce recognition at the time of death. This recognition must be consciously cultivated through the student's own effort in the practice of tranquility and insight, which must become stable.
Dene ta tela yang remji tembe kapsula temrem jitang number go ndago ji sharge yore la dene ta te yang temrem trup de kasin dene cheke patu kapla jongre sa chola tamba jai chomela tamba ni dene ta ti ji sula me long la tamba som dene long nong hi la tamba ye nong hi nong kha la tamba nga dene ta ti nga te je hi tanda cheke patu kapla chongre la cheke patu ge tama de la dene tanda tama de la dene nong kha wesa la tamba singin ti di kap tana la ta tanda ye nelu de charni tene di ge cheke bardo de zo ne tene ta chuni bardo ngo zo ne chuni ge noa de char yung di kap tana la temrem tuwa nong kha wesa la tam sungi yore la ta di ge ripa de chasang do ne chuni ge noa de char ge yore tene chuni ge noa de tang ngoi sai na 다 디갑드나라 띵엔zen cheparjenje jilla jine teni de tingenzhen tele yar dang kapsula teni ngara jewa zambo len to bi nubatan temate yungi yore la teni de tabu ngu mazin na ya tak de tabu ngu mazin na teni yeni ya tunthong da boje shargi yore la teni di ge namka vesala temba da temdum tubare 다 농가 외살 틈비기 요 드나 라틴이 농가 간샤르게 요레세나 외살 순주 라튼 바생기데 틈름 덤바디 용게 요레라 디네 외살 순주 라튼 바디 틈름데 샤르 갑슬라 가레 용게데세나 통통 투 라조데 샤르게 요레 통통 투 라조 젠동 차루 선생 나조 다 데라 넘바 데지 만다와 디네 다웨 세르성 넘바다고데 샤르게 요레 다 가세 인가라조 다지 그 갑슬라 데네 다 휴바yen도 다지 그 갑슬라 데네 레베난도 예바데 두징아치 자지데 야르 룰레 달리용도 데네 통통투 그 넘반다고 아 데네 다데 지당 그 바르도 투돌 그 나네 당보 성나 예외게 Bardo de Tangbo Unji Bajeta, True Bardo de Jima Unji Bantaboje, Song Yorella, Tandang Aranzo Bardu Tiginala, then the True Bardo de Tangbo and Char, then the Heavy Bardo de Jiman Charwa, Davoji, Song Yore, Inayata de Koremangi Bandavo, Takoram Kande, Charnaya, Tati Tanda, Timdem Dumba. Wesar sunju la tembeka sola teni DJ tambotu parto char teni dige kapsula ta la tenzo teni Jeremy yabo chuma inna la tenzo ngonche teni Jeremy yabo majuna ta tenzo la tenzo ngomenche ba teni perna ngone ge Jeremy yabo je majuna ya teni tanda ge je yalthang jarwa ta 그 꾼jarwa 소발라야 베 데네 고바 침부 요래 디갑드나라 다 전시기 지세나 이름 잘라 된소 무생이요 반다고 야나 타나 지도 미제 완다고다 데네 디갑드나라 란jarwa 좀 지장 하장 그 고바 침부 요래
The entire process of dissolution, which comprises both the interval of the time of death and the further dissolutions which occur in the interval of dharmata, is ninefold. 6 of these stages have occurred by the time you enter the interval of dharmata. And then the 6th is the border between these two. Then the 7th, 8th, and 9th occur within the Bardo of Dharmata itself. The 6 stages of dissolution, which we have already gone through, are the dissolution of earth into water, water into fire, fire into wind, wind into consciousness, and consciousness into space. Those 5, which are completed within the interval of the time of death. And then the 6th, which is the border between the interval of the time of death and the interval of dharmata, is called the dissolution of space into the clear light. The dissolution of space into the clear light refers to the appearance of dharmata, the appearance of the ground clear light or ground wisdom. If through familiarization during the preceding life, the person who has died recognizes the dharmata, then they can rest in it in a state of meditative absorption. And when they thereafter arise from that meditative absorption, they will be able to choose a good rebirth. If we do not recognize the dharmata or the ground clear light, then bewildered appearances will gradually arise. Now the 7th dissolution, what normally or usually ensues upon the dissolution of space into the clear light is called the dissolution of the clear light into unity. And what happens at the time of this seventh dissolution is that the wrathful deities appear. They appear in their various modes of appearance with their costumes and scepters and colors and so forth. They appear in the midst of very loud sounds, brilliant lights, and piercing rays of multicolored light. And they appear, as has been said, because they have emerged from your body upon the separation of mind and body at death. Now you will note that the Great Liberation Through Hearing in the Bardo says that the peaceful deities appear first and the wrathful deities appear afterward. Here, our text tells us that the wrathful deities appear first and the peaceful deities appear afterward. We can infer from this that the order may vary. The point, however, is that at this point in the Bardo, these deities start to appear. And according to the sequence of our text, during the dissolution of the clear light into unity, those who appear first are the wrathful ones. Now, if you have cultivated a generation stage practice focused on the wrathful deities, you will be able to recognize them when they appear, which is a good thing. If you have not familiarized yourselves with these deities in any way, you will not recognize them, you will be frightened of them, which is not a good thing. Even if you have not practiced the visualization of these deities, even if you have familiarized yourself with them by studying paintings of them or statues of them and so on, you may be able to recognize them. And even if you don't recognize them, you may be able to have enough of a habit of liking their appearance that you are not afraid of them, which is a very good thing.
Tene ta te jesala tu pardo de sharsa kasala tene hirazo rimba yendala charne tene je di kapsula tene je kipo ndabota njada we garangi tile tan teaching garangi tene jalware nga sonchu sempa sema ala so pata tenso chargi yore la tene ta te yendo ta te tabu chargi yore te tabu charwe kapso tene tanda chitang ta mege somsula ta je yana tene plate zuge nazata jendang chaluta hiwatung tu lazo tenzuge jendang chalu zedang tene tenzo je pek lusundabu je pepa la deshar yang shijandabu je ina yenda jishar yang na nangbege lusundabu je la deshar yang nangba mayingbe lusula yenda jishar men roi sambatabu yore de kapkala yung sikre te ina te mare te karire se na korang ranging ke de tene pek lusul tang tamba ya mayin ba tene namba sanji ba jaga ke lusul ki hin shu ba yo mayin ba ranging ye ni ngaran su lu la ya ba de tene ta tanda tongdu ne tang da bo de lu ki zang kor ge nang de la ten su ya ba tene de chilo la tan yung ka so la de char ge yo re la de char ge yo bi jun sen ya tene pe na zoba chimbo tögal gam ki so ge ta chitang ge tögal ya po gam tögal tencha jin gam na tene de la tile char ge yo ba je ta tene tile de ya tembo chong ne tene ta tanda zoba chimbo kati sene wela tene gamba ta nakti sene mumbala tene gamba ta tene gam ki yore la te gam du te la tene che te la sacha ya boto boto tencha ya boto na tombo tile tan titin char tile tan titin ke na ne lai namba char ki yore la Tinti lai number Herwati, Naransu Gom Nihawa Maimba, Rankin Luigi Nandu Yapatel, need number Latini, Tini, Tingus Hargi or Mus Hav Capsula, Tini he will have to Lazo Tinzus Hargi or Latinity, Kitang Chulu Hinda Bota, Tini Yulu Hinda Bot in the Maimba. Ranking the Shargi or Lati, Party Nekalaya, Tagaran, Shargi or.
According to our text, after the appearance of the wrathful deities, the peaceful deities start to appear. And this is explained as being a pleasant mode of appearance. The peaceful deities appear surrounded by rainbow light and spheres of multicolored light and smaller spheres of multicolored light. The peaceful deities include the 5 male and 5 female Buddhas, the 8 male and 8 female Bodhisattvas, and so forth. Now, with regard to the mode of appearance of the wrathful and peaceful deities in the Bardo, many people have thought that the description of how these deities appear is either culturally or religiously specific. Culturally specific in the sense that the colors and postures and appearances of these deities, as well as the clothing and jewelry that they wear and the scepters that they hold, that all of these things are based on a Tibetan cultural tradition, and that therefore foreigners, non-Tibetans, would not see these deities. They would see them as appearing differently. Other people say that it's not cultural, but it is based upon a belief system, so that Buddhists would see these deities looking like this, non-Buddhists would see other deities or deities appearing differently. Well, first of all, the appearance of these deities is certainly not a Tibetan cultural tradition. In fact, it is not even an Indian cultural tradition. Nor do they appear the way they appear because you expect them to or because you believe in them. Whether or not you believe in them, they're going to appear the way they appear, because they exist within the channels of your body, and they emerge from these channels at death. There is proof of this, proof of the consistent manner of appearance of the peaceful and wrathful deities. And this proof is gained from the practice of leapover within the Great Perfection tradition. In the practice of leapover, in reliance upon either the practice of light or the practice of darkness, the person who cultivates this practice properly and stably first experiences or sees drops or spheres of light and smaller drops or spheres of light. And then, as the meditation becomes more stable and more clear, within these drops of light, they actually see these peaceful and wrathful deities. Now, when you see these deities, you are not imagining them. You are seeing them. They are not an object of belief. Furthermore, they are not produced by the meditation technique. You are enabled to see them by the meditation technique, but they themselves are not produced by it. They are already present within your body. And because they appear consistently, as they are described in the texts, to practitioners of leapover, we can infer that they also appear consistently to beings in the Bardo or interval.
다 대답을 투 Bardo 당 예외 Bardo 혈와텔라 템름게 나니 템름 덤바 다 회사 순주라 덤바 순기와라 데니 회사 순주라 덤바 디갑드나라 다 디게 농아된서 샤르 데니 다 대답을 정네 다 템름 예바텔라 순주 예히라 덤바 순기와래 Sunju Yehi La Tempe Capsula, Teni Tai Hive Lazo to Tue Lazo Donji, Rang La Tempe no Wanda, which is Yarni, Teni Tati Gila, Teni Rang, Ningani, Teni Wet the position, Wet Tingata, Carboton, Servoton, Marbo, Teni Tea, Jay, Wet the Rimbo, Double, Jay Yarni. Teni ta de la ya teni we rimbo de la ya teni tile mangbu gi jamba teni chargi wara la teni de la de muisena teni yehi gijurglam se yehi gijurjulam teni de la we donko de chagi yo mare teni de la shawatu bi ta yehi ngai rongzu de la shawatu patingu so ma to ba yibichana de chagi yo mare ta de jes la timrim gubate yehi lundu rinzen la tamba se teni ta de kapsala teni ti ge tainto teni we de du da boje ga no yar ta de ti teni rimbayindala chargi yore
Kapo marpo tenga sepo.
lao
Shi doa.
yeda
Tene de tata de chimrem jepa zungju ishe la tempe kapsu tene de öze de rangi nyinga ne pa trowa tongre yana tsu.
rang ningan padwa tong
Pa trowa.
padwa
Nasa.
ta chitang rang le padwa yin bichina kanga rang le twa
Oh, nasa. The appearances of both the wrathful and peaceful deities make up the 7th of the 9 stages of dissolution, and which is called the dissolution of the clear light into unity. After that has occurred, the 8th dissolution occurs, which is called the dissolution of unity into wisdom. At this point, the deities that have appeared dissolve into you, dissolve into the being that is experiencing them. And then there emerge from your heart rays of brilliant light of 4 colors that shoot out from your heart to a great distance. The 4 colors are white, yellow, blue, and red. The 5th color, green, does not appear because these rays of light are the display of the 5 wisdoms. And as the person experiencing this has not achieved accomplishment, the 5th wisdom, the wisdom of accomplishment, and therefore the green light does not arise. But the other 4 do arise, and these rays or pathways of light are adorned with spheres and rings of light of their corresponding colors. After that, then the 9th dissolution occurs, which is called the dissolution of wisdom into spontaneous presence. Sometimes it's called the dissolution of wisdom into the Vidyadhara of spontaneous presence. During this 9th dissolution, you start to experience domes of light, somewhat like parasols above you. And these are of the same 4 colors as the preceding rays of light.
teni ta te tabu ta tanda sharni ta te la yang ngaran so nyamsal lembe kapsula ta yen rintung de kandi ji shargi yore se na ta te susu ge ta chitang ge tujun de la ina yen tung tung ji ma tu shargi yo mare la teni ta te la something ji ho se ge yo kasin numa cha ji hu song la something ji ho se na tanda ngaran so je tingen san la nyambar ga ka sar ka se ji ho tu ge yo na te la something ji ho se ge yo re la teni te nyamni ya po yo na teni something ji ho je ni ngai par chiri pa la ta te ta bu ne ge yo re ma to teni te ha chang ge yin rimbo ne ge yo ma re la teni ta te nyambar yo tu na teni ripa ji zu ne ya ta ne je teni ta je pa du ge chun hong da bo ki da men jong wa teni je wa sang bo len ta ba teni yin sa re
Rikpa chitsune jone dene eche duk de zola tempa.
Yeah, well.
Dene santange sha chikne ngape barsana chemrem gopa yeshe londrut la tempa kona la seke warebe.
Di tanda chuni bardu ke temrem tanda sama.
Chemrem sumde. In practical terms, if you ask how long all of this lasts or how long all of this takes, for most people it's very brief, because again, it is measured in meditation days. A meditation day, as before, means the period of time for which the experiencing being can rest his or her mind in a state of even placement. So if the person has stable meditation, these dissolutions will last longer. If the person does not, they will be very brief. In general, the duration of the 3 dissolutions of the Bardo of Dharmata that we've just gone through can last anywhere from 1 to 5 meditation days. And if the person is able to rest in meditation during this, and also recognize the appearances as their own display, then their awareness will, during this 9th dissolution, the dissolution of wisdom into spontaneous presence, during this 9th dissolution, their awareness will emerge from the top of their head and dissolve into the lights of spontaneous presence, enabling them to avoid much of the bewilderment of the later parts of the interval and enabling them to take a good rebirth. I'm going to stop for there this morning. Since we did not have time for questions yesterday, you may ask questions now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rinpoche. Last year, you gave some instruction on the practice of light and darkness, and I'm wondering whether that's considered complementary to the Shicho practice that was introduced this year, or whether there's an explicit way of integrating it with that practice.
Kasong de tuga ge nangtri da muntri de song nani. Dene data de dalo sompa ge shitro dakche de da de nangtri muntri ge nyam de so nyam de nyam su lanjo yore pes.
Nyam su lanjo yore ba.
You can combine them because they serve the same function.
Thank you.
The descriptions of the Vijayataras and their retinue look like the charnel ground practitioners of the charnel ground yogis and dakinis and so forth. So is this associated with Chud practice?
Directly. Dakpa Ritsin je latso kurtan je pa thanche da konso ke korla ne pe power dan kandroma de so ke dotro la ne pe nadro pomo ke nabada yore se. Den sang dene data de Ritsin sharwe kapso ko ke latso shawa de chu nyam so lempa porebe.
Je nyam so lempa po se na ya ta jitang ke je se tu ngaran so damo sero ba je ke main ba. Damo sero ba je ke main re la teni zo ta tup tup chenpo ten so de je to che ke na pe wi ore la. Ti junsin kare de se na ta je ma sa ni som na teni mto pa tan ngin jung ji ke ta bo je da. Teni yan to sa ni som na teni je ta zongin ke nam to tan ji to la so pa pong be ke tan da bo je ke tan to la teni to che la pe ge ore la ta te je nyam ni nang ki re se na yum de ge ba je nyam ni nang ki mare se na ndegeware jesenge te ta chitang dancing jepe ke tap na bujela te nangeware ba
That the core layer bage
Core layer
pomo. Well, the Dakas and Dakinis that appear in the retinues of the pure Vidyadharas and the Bardo, you could think of them as practitioners of the essence of Chu or severance, but not necessarily of the specific technique that we call Chu. We use the term Chu to refer to a specific tradition, a set of instructions, a set of techniques. The use of charnel grounds by yogis and yoginis is more general than that. Mahasiddhas have resorted to charnel grounds from a beginner's point of view, we would say, in order to develop a heartfelt understanding of impermanence, and from an advanced point of view, in order to transcend thoughts of good and bad. So, in that the beings that appear surrounding the Vidyadharas are such as Mahasiddhas, who, as you said in your question, might inhabit charnel grounds, in essence, you can think of them as equivalent to Chö practitioners, but they're not necessarily going to be people who specifically practice that tradition.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
I had two questions, Rinpoche. One is a clarification. When the five consciousnesses dissolve into the sixth, it got a little fuzzy after that, so to speak. I wondered exactly, do five go into six, six into seven?
He didn't say five into six, he said five into the all basis.
So each goes into the all basis consciousness.
Well, let's ask him.
And then, no, the connection to the red, the white, the red, and the black.
Tata the timrim dang, the namshe tsokche tempa ke draso ke kola, dambo ke timrim rakpe kaso gongai namba shepa, the kunjila tengi oripe. Jesu de kala malam nalam kaso, drokpa dan dumpa dan jepa de kadu tengi ori.
Tanda gong number hibata, hiki number hibata nyamdo.
Nyamdo tengi.
Nyamdo tengi yosare.
Lasa?
La teni ti kalam tong malam ni ka kapsala nyai te ten.
Lasa?
Malam ji kapsala teni ke himari picha ten gani teni yei wasa hel.
Then they are the kalam kapsa the drukpa yichinamche timsawarebe.
Timsawan ro yisare.
It seems, Rinpoche said, that the five sense consciousnesses and the sixth consciousness, the mental consciousness, probably dissolve simultaneously into the all basis. And this would occur over the period of the coarse external dissolution. The seventh consciousness, the afflicted mental consciousness, dissolves into the all basis during the first two, the white appearance and red increase of the inner dissolution. And then during the third, black attainment, the all basis consciousness dissolves.
Thank you for that, Rinpoche. The final question was, what is the direct introduction to clear light?
Tata de tekar ngutu zamayimba ke shine tembo go song do tekar ngutu kana segore.
Tekar ngote sena ta jitang ta semtik na ne tika sala semji ngo ne nong tong ne tang den de ji re sombe nyong da ji ta me mang bola je ge yora ba ti je wa de la ngote se ge yora ngote de la ka la thang bo che char ya pa ye do ji ba do den de mai ba ta ngaran sol kare go ge yora se na te tempo ji ka du ina ya ye ba je tene rawang ye ba do je ko shardu sha meha tela nyam ta rawang me ba do je ba tene nguni gong ko tokwa tela kare go re se na ngara gom tu sha tene ma gom tu meha ngara gom tela rawang ye ba do je go re ba te ta bla tene hinne ge tenja ye ba do tela penna nyam naving tong da ti yal ni ro tene to pa ro tong da ti tembur ni sikin da ta ti ngor nam ti di orba
What's called a direct introduction to the mind or to the mind's nature refers to something that a teacher does when giving what's called guidance on the mind. And while giving guidance on the mind, they may actually tell you what the mind is really like, to tell you what the mind's nature is. And when receiving such a direct introduction to the mind, most people gain some kind of experience, some degree of experience of the mind's nature. The problem with this is that because they gained that experience under the power of the teacher's impressive instruction, the experience, first of all, gradually disappears as the time passes. And furthermore, they have no control over it because they did not give rise to the experience under their own power. So not only does the experience disappear, but because it was not gained through their meditation practice, they can't regain it even through meditation. This is not as useful to us as a kind of experience that is gained through your own meditation. What you want is where, whenever you meditate, you can experience your mind's nature. And when you don't meditate, you may not, but at least you can gain that experience at will through meditation. And in order to do this, you need to develop a stable tranquility and then gradually cultivate insight. Otherwise, you simply have had an impressive experience that has vanished. As was said in meditation songs, experience is like mist, it vanishes. Realization is like a mountain, it stays there.
Thank you.
Rinpoche, I was wondering if the 100 peaceful and wrathful deities are just within the human realm, or if all beings, all sentient beings, have the 100 peaceful, wrathful deities.
The Shitro Damparicha de Migi Lugi Nala Yorepe, Yana Simchin Samagi Lugi Nala Yorepes.
Then Tati Senji
Sama.
Samala Yorella. Then Tanda taken on the Somaya, John Simbi, stop at the Hargrism, then the song.
Not just humans, all beings. The commentaries say this will be experienced even by a bug that lived on a blade of grass.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Rinpoche, I think yesterday you talked about cognitive capacity, and that's always there, naked awareness, what have you, and that's Buddha nature. And so it seems to imply that there's always a knower, a perceiver and a knower, or a knower of some type. Doesn't that still imply there's a duality taking place?
Chedonso that the semji ngowa de sariktsam yore sonso. Sariktsam de deshinyum pore sonso. Sariktsam de la Vipashyana, Vipapoda, Vipa yul dan yulche ni gogmandaway.
Ti salrik sinking the Yulda, Eugene Nige, Nambatan Dembisari, the body. Sal said Kanga, Harduruan, the hotel. Tapena, Naranzo, Semjin, Mo, the Chitang, Kanaya Mebaje, Tomba, Tomba taking more the candidate, Tachia Meba, Tening a Tangarang to Junto, Penton Segi Orella. Tenitia Mepa, Penton Sena, Ronda Botende, Tomba Imbala, Tomba Ronda Imba, Revisina Mare, Teni Tomba della de Cho Takanga Hakon King, the Voce, Yorella, Tentil Salrik Segi Ore.
Mere cognitive lucidity does not presuppose or require a subject and object, because it is the capacity for cognition the capacity for experience. And that mere capacity in and of itself does not have or require an object, and therefore it is not a subject. The reason why this has to be mentioned at all is that when it is said that the mind's nature is an utter emptiness, that it is nothing at all, this, while true, can be misleading if you leave it at that. Because while it is true that the mind is so empty of existence that it is nothing at all, it is not just nothing at all. If you say something is nothing at all, it implies nothingness. It implies a corpse-like state of absence of experience. But the mind, while it is nothing at all, is not just nothing at all, because it can experience.
Thank you.
Rinpoche, the wrathful deities are many. Is there one that predominates that would relate to an individual because of their own consciousness? Is that clear?
You mean is a given individual going to have a greater connection with one of the 58 or 60?
Exactly. And also with the Tathagatas.
Mm-hmm. That the true latso tong shiva latso nika mombo dawa yore. True ngachu ngajam rukchu tong shiva shichu sheni yore. De gangsa mixel ge detso ge nan la hla mixel pen true ge nan ne chik tang shiva ge nan ne chik la mixel ge ledel dawa ham dene dela sova dap de gom na penyun chewa dawa yore bes.
Tela tajitang ke ngarazo dene wang yu kapsala dene soking pengi yore tati jawa rik ngak nane rang susu ke rik kang imbadabo nguen zimbe ke chedo tile nangi yore la dene te je susu ke rik te chuji yin je rik dene ta doji rik rinpoche rik peme rik sita sosu yaba te kashi tinte yojire la ten ya rik te yo na ya misal ke chebar meba tamchi la tene solvata tamchi la tene nyamne che na ya ndrige yojire.
There is the idea of Buddha family affiliation, which is to say that in an elaborate empowerment ceremony, you will at some point cast what is called a toothstick onto a simplified representation of the mandala. And it is taught that where the toothstick falls can indicate your affiliation with one among the 5 Buddha families, such as the Tathagata or Dharmadhatu family, the Vajra family, the Lotus family, the Jewel family, or the Action family. However, at the same time, this is not regarded as that big a deal. And generally speaking, one is encouraged to meditate on and supplicate all of them.
And so this is also true of the wrathful deities.
Din san true ge latsot na nayang chi.
Te ringa susu ba. Ringa te chikbar ba.
Yeah, because they're divided into the same 5 families.
The wrathful deities
Yeah.
are?
Buddha Dharma,
Buddha Heruka Laso.
Buddha Heruka, Rena Heruka, Betsa Heruka. Te chikbar.
Yeah.
True, re hiwa di hiwa.
They're wrathful, but other than that, they're the same 5 family manifestations. You know, Buddha Heruka, Vajra Heruka, and so on.
Well, I was actually thinking of the deities that have different animal heads.
Dine chamen gonyen de tsoyina pena
Da
de
di
shivele de dunda.
zo da de ringa re la. Di konso to ba.
Alright. They're all flow out from the five families. They're all like, there may be more than one of them at the outer perimeter, but they're still divided into the families.
I see. Thank you very much.
I'm a little confused about the 8th disillusion and the 9th when he talks about visualizing the light rays coming from the heart and then in the domes over the head.
He didn't say anything about visualizing.
Oh, he just said they come from...
You see them.
You see them, but is there a body? I mean, how are you all of a sudden in the heart?
Right, okay. Tata de timrim jepa dang gopa ke kasa tene rangi nyenka na yoze trawa dang rangi ke togala tene tata de gorpo pam dup popa trawa ke nawashawa de rang sena rangi lu kandra yore ichi lu rebe.
다 띠깝드나 로라마 임바 당랑 소소라 당하지 요 상바도 요라
일루
일루.
Well, at that point, you do have a mental body that is generated by the habit of thinking you exist. It's thinking I, me. And so therefore you assume that you have a body. And that's the source of the perspective. That assumed body. It's not the corpse.
Thank you.
Rinpoche, I was wondering, you said that there's a white constituent in the head from the father.
La. So, excuse me, Bonnie. Whoever's in line now, stay in line. Nobody else get in line. So, about the white constituent in the head.
Yes, and the red constituent in the navel from the mother.
Mm-hmm.
Does this mean that you have still a karmic connection via these materials from your parents, or is this generic from person to person?
That pale topake kacha da male topake macha de CD kasuyeno umage yane da manela negioreso. De pale topa da male topa insan de ngone zede de pagi zeda mage ze ngone re dang de insan de la ledrel chemba yadam yana de dan chatumba sam rangelu ji zerebe.
대라 찬tum바 좀 인지래. 다 지당 그 나라 루차상테 대라 때는 투바로 사벤도. 대라 때는 투바레데 자외게 사벤도보테 동보 다 대라 때네 제 가르차다 마르차니 보테 교다 대와니 대오니라 네 잘라 때네 인지 민지 코라 드가랑 인비 잡아요 말에. 대레 좋아한다고 인지래.
Well, they're not in the sense that these are not the original sperm and ovum themselves, because the sperm and ovum have, after all, developed into your entire body. So in that sense, you could think that your whole body, not just these two constituents, are an outgrowth of the original substances from your parents. These are like the kernels of those two aspects of your body, so that they correspond to, but are not actually the original substances which were the conditions for conception.
And then one short question about karma. Is resuscitation during the process of death only possible for one dying as a result of sudden conditions, for instance, an accident, or is it possible to revive someone also whose life force is running out?
That the traji chenji shiwa da ngunji leji shiwa ni yosegyo. That samsam pena gadriki dapa yana kanyana dene halam shinang konsoge ya sugyo res. Ya tupna de tenden traji chensam iyempa chagyo repe yana kashe ke ngunji leji je de jonayang yasuya yosigrepe.
ngi lela mambo ndirwa ngi lela ya nguni higup lesa pata ya nguni dab gup lesa pata te soso indirwa dab gup lesa na te ya ko ya suya yorwa.
It's possible that the condition for that person dying could be karmic and they could be resuscitated, But in that case, the karma would include the karma of resuscitation.
Thank you, Rinpoche. This question may be premature. Again, it's Buddhologist may or may not be true stuff. When you die, I was told that you have to go to the bright light, not to the calm, gentle light. Is that the wrathful deities that you were supposed to wait for? And
Dere de morong ke singmo yang de la ge yores. Susu shibe kapse de rigni sha ge yores. Tserwa hacha je matopak tserwa chendang. Te tsam shuk chongwa ro. Nikala kado manro yores. Shuk chewa de injimiji dam go gudo de tarpe lamres. Shuk chongwa de ruktok ke lamres. Data de sumba ge mezopa da zotopa deni chowo ge ya da shiva ge ya re be kanda re.
Tela hiu el samora. Part tu ru kabla.
Ola kaka re mo.
Hiu in zalo. Part tu
Tens kaka re song. Chek to de shiva ge la shawa ka su dunyam do yang ruktok ge sha ge re de tets kaka re do.
Ore. Tindiri.
Karejini shive latso tegi toka tena deda deshinka. Ore.
Teni yima nga tujek do kya.
Ola so.
Teni da wori omare.
Well, the that's not wrong. The dim, comforting lights that lead to samsaric rebirth are not the lights of the peaceful deities themselves. Those are also bright, but they appear at the same time. And there is the danger, because they're comforting and familiar and not threatening like the bright lights of the deities, that one might choose them and therefore be reborn in samsara.
the wrathful ones.
No, it's not like that. Forget about peaceful and wrathful for the moment. These deities emit light of wisdom, the lights of the five wisdoms, and it's brighter it's more irritating in the case of the wrathful ones, but in either case it's bright and could potentially be frightening because of its brilliance. The light of the six that is the gateways to the six realms is muted and familiar. So it's not that the peaceful deity's light is familiar and non-threatening. It's less threatening than the wrathful deity's light, but they're both wisdom light. They're not. They mena morang desam gyores chowa latsok ki ola tene tarpa tang shiwe latsok ola tene korwa iloma de marwa. No, it's not the case that being attracted to the light of the peaceful deities is cause of samsara. It's being attracted to the muted light of the six realms. But what Rinpoche said was it does appear at the same time. In other words, it's almost like there's a choice that has to be made.
With the peaceful and the wrathful.
Dine shive latso nyamde rikdoki ödet so shagyore. Chuwa latso nyamde yang rikdoki ödet so shagyore be. Makes sense. They don't particularly say that. They talk about the light of the six realms appearing at the culmination of the appearance of the peaceful deities, who originally appear in their individual groups and then appear all together. And at that time, at the same time, the light of the samsaric realms starts to appear too.
Rinpoche, when we do Vajrasattva as part of our Nundro, is there any particular way we could use the 100-syllable mantra to the benefit of the deities in our body?
That dorsemge ngonro dorsemge yikja dambe kapsu dene yikja ke depala tene range lupo namna yapa ke shitro dambarikja pembe tap yorepes pembe tap sena konso pengo mno konso ngatso pengo. Do you mean to help them, or to help them help us? Either one.
Whatever I can get.
Tena consola pempo yana dona di inside that the yigja depala tene damparikja ke latso Dantes Jalvazoya Am Sova Dapa Dogitsu Yor.
Shari Salpo Mus Jalvandapote, Hunkagret, Inaya, Tige, Delvala Tenbe, Pempachimbo Jere, Tinitela, Naranso, Tachitang, Doji Sempegomdete, Digdip Jama Sigrela, Digdip Jama Situ, Dipasena Tatia, Senda Tatia Namal, Ling and Basoiga Patinsopa, Chaya Jada, Dripasena Tini, Jitang, Niemomba Drabat, Hiji Drabani, Penani, Niemomba, the Shahedo Timula Sopa, Chumdun Royata, Tini Hiji Drabasena, Namto Rapa, Henzi, Hemba Chimbo Yabatinzoma, Chumdun Roya in Picena, the Tenzoya, Zangma Yapojirena, Tini Dig Tanda Hitulazo Tenzoya, Nubanda Chair Dogroya.
There's certainly a connection between the 100-syllable mantra and the 100 peaceful and wrathful deities. At the same time, it's unlikely that repetition of the 100-syllable mantra is going to cause you to directly see them. But the practice of Vajrasattva, including the repetition of the mantra, is designed to purify two things, wrongdoing and obscurations. Wrongdoing refers to things we have done in this life and also in all previous lives. Obscurations refers to two types of obscuration. The afflictive obscuration, which is the mental afflictions, attachment, aversion, bewilderment, pride, and jealousy. And the cognitive obscuration, which is the fixation on the self and so forth. Now, these two are gradually purified along with the imprints of wrongdoing by the repetition of this mantra in conjunction with the visualization. As these things are purified, as therefore your kleshas and your fixation start to be reduced, then you could think of this as augmenting the power of the peaceful and wrathful deities to benefit you.
Thank
you. Rinpoche, I'm a little confused about the 8th and 9th stages of dissolution. They sound like some kind of accomplishment, and I'm wondering, does ordinary person, so falling into the unconsciousness, say one does not recognize the clear light, first of all, just to clarify, one does anyway then experience the peaceful and wrathful deities and then goes on to these 8th and 9th stages? And then also, if you could just repeat or re-clarify the 9th, I didn't quite get that one.
That the chigi useji Bardo kapsu the timpa sumde the pena that the gangza palpa ge wonde zeparepe pena the shi usa the ngoma tru dene jalwata the yongeres jalwa the songsa the yang trowo dan shive latso tangwa dang de jese range ninka ne user trowa dang dene yala duk popa dawa de tsoke kansa tamapa ke tongrepe yana shi yeso de ngozung tsawa ke kansa kona la shagyore
nikala shagre
nikala shagre
ta de nu sena ya de ya tanda jebata sunju yehi la tamba yehi rinzin la tamba ni pote ya saltun ro tendun ro ba tingu mazin na ya te sarap sakharni te phayar ro.
These things will be experienced by both an individual who fails to recognize and an individual who succeeds in recognizing the ground clear light. The difference is that as the individual emerges from, in the case of the first person, a state of unconsciousness, in the case of the second person, a state of samadhi, these appearances, which are here called dissolutions, will definitely occur, but they will last longer, be more vivid, and be more stable for the person who has recognized the ground clear light than they will be for the person who has not done so.
Thank you. And with the 9th...
Oh, right, you want it, yeah. Dine tempa gupate, yeshe londrup rigzin la tempa de nama kandra yore. Selpo goma sonsa. Basically, the 9th dissolution is an experience of what are called parasols of light of these 4 colors above you.
And the mention of the Vidyadharas?
De la lundup rigzin jiming Basically, the names of these dissolutions describe a progressive, increasing clarity or intensity of experience. And that's why the last one is called that.
Okay. Thank you.
Tene tanda ngarang ke khya jela tene cherto ngarang ke mama ke kapsula tene chitang ke kharshola tene je gamba ta ani gamba ta tende mandawa ta tombi chuge de tine la pembe setla khare jachim bosikan yungi yo marete ina yang ngarang ke kan tutu ta ngarang tombi chu pemkin ji sondu tombi chu je kangala pembe ke chetu tende legam kahi jabarala teni tikapsala ngarang ke somdu te la je nushu gangala kaya jemaso kaya ta nushu gangala nushu ga loma tenzo la pembe ke chetu la ngarang ke teni chu ke tilenda kaya jemaso la tini te tsani yabu mandu kariri se na je se na sharchu ta nuchu ni se du chu la ngune ge moba ta nyamne yapa te je ngarang ge tongso la ai ta je se na nuchu ba ga ge men ro song sang ra no sha ge la te pe chu la te pa ta mo gu ngune ge nyamne nang ki 단다이나 야 대다르도 강가게 냠내나 전주 문에게 되는데 지당 그 몽디 정말인바 되는 문에게 준신 힙을 거네 담비 추주고라 효 담비 추주고라 효네 다라나 소수게 난상게 랭긴다 소수게 랭긴 망보 요래데 있나야 데 갈춘춘시 담비 추두지데 갈침보시네 냠내낭주데 빼 펜도 침보래라데 디게 제 로마초라 냠내낭산다보제다 되니 근데 이제 요나 빼 펜도 침보 대 마이나 당가랑 rep사 제용 제 야친도 가보 가히지 되니 나랑 팔로도 로마초라 제 고고당가 반다보제 렌도그멘로 데 티처나 제 दुखां जे जाप थपना पे कालचम बुद्धो सामने तने दुखां जे एयों के रेवाचे परला तने दुखां ते एयों के रेवाचे दु अलाया ता सो ने पे रोरम बुन्ना योरे ला तने जे तंबो सचारे tene tegendola tene kangba jebzi gere leka ga goni re kasa kane roram mambo nang yore la tene lomatsu ga nang yore tene tegendola tanda ngaranso tasdi member 쪽에 로람 자침보 나요래 되니 진도 쪽에 로람 자침보 나요래 로마치당 로마 쪽에 로람 자침보 나요래 땅 알아서 대지야야 소소토바지 정요래 디나니 미살도 되니 클라다 패트니 배 깔레망보 잡니 레가망보 제요래 강가라 두지 제효고 반다고 되는데 정요래 라 정요래 되니 대강가 배 까든 쳔보 정요래 펜도 쳔보 정요래 되니 대세도 될라 단다야 땅 알아서야 제 단대 송생킨데 내가 정요 말해라 되니 대세도 될라 강가게 단동야 들이 단다 비디오지 땡거 오사래라 되니 비디오 때 템백업라 디자인이 되니 카르세 툭툭 되니 로마초게 대하야 나요래라 단동요 가시 툭툭 되니 나랑게 생큐 야비요래 되니 로마초게 다디 단 나란서 제 나란서 베게 덤벨라 샤라툰디 라 샤라툰디 샤라시나 되니 다 타노 잘라지 되나 오래 데 레쳔보지 따이나 오래 다디야 저거나 오래 되니 수연 강가디야 저거를 마도 소대네 맞아나 되니 만톨 현도 그래 오래 된 된다고 강가 소 강가네 대 강가 강다도 지도 나로 로람 나로제
before we part for this morning, there is one thing that I would like to talk about briefly. Up to now, while I don't regard my accomplishments in this area as anything tremendous, I have been able to create several monasteries in Asia, both those for male monastics and those for female monastics. And in that way, while again I don't think it's anything tremendous, I feel that I have done something for practitioners in Asian countries. But when I think about what I've accomplished in the West, I've often felt that I hadn't really accomplished anything at all, that I hadn't really accomplished anything serious for the benefit of Western practitioners. And from time to time I felt some dissatisfaction and concern about this, because it seems to me when I look at it that nowadays Westerners are even more interested in Dharma practice than people in Asia. For one thing, you all come to the practice of Dharma by choice. And having done so, you're very diligent in your practice and in your investigation and study. The basis for your practice is your understanding, your recognition of Dharma's validity. It is not merely naive faith. Furthermore, although you're all extremely busy and have great responsibilities, you still manage to practice. So because all of this is true, I've wished again and again that there could be a place for people to practice in this country. If I can't do that, if I can't create such a thing, I've felt, then my coming to these places and talking big, giving elaborate teachings which by implication make great promises, and then disappearing again, is nothing more than deception, because I am not giving you the necessary resources to follow through in practice. For this reason, I had hoped for a long time to be able to create a retreat facility, a place where people could practice. Now, many of you, and many other people as well, have helped tremendously in the creation of this retreat thus far. Initially in the acquisition of the land, subsequently in the building of the retreat so far. People have worked very, very hard. They've made financial contributions of skills of all kinds, as well as their time. I want to thank all of you, the many disciples, the members of the board of the trust, and so on, and especially Pat and Clark, who've worked so hard for so long to bring this project to its fruition. I really owe all of you my most sincere thanks. But I also have to say that the project is not completed. We're not done yet. So therefore, I encourage you to watch the video that is going to be shown to you later on, and I ask all of you to please continue to provide the support in many ways that you have provided up to now. We have a saying about this in Tibetan, and I honestly can't think of a word for this thing, but it means a cloth that you're going to hold stuff on. If you lift a cloth that you're going to hold stuff on, it has to be lifted from all four corners. If one corner drops, then the stuff that you're trying to lift up is going to roll out. So in the same way, we all have to work together in order for this project to continue to grow and finally be completed. Thank you.
Tene ta tela ngarang rewasena yare chenamba kanga rewasena yare chu nyomlin se paje tanda ta chitang yonggu yore la tene te ya ta chitang chu nyomlin se pate ya chitang ngaran so mrab ge nyomlin se gu yore la ngaran so cham mai ba tene mrab jima ge nyomlin se gu yore tene te se du tela te manyang ba je be 갈체기 와라 드니 대세도 드네 제 주게 대완다고 제 쳐야 돼배 갈체 와라 드니 단다 나랑 그 인터뷰 시작할까 memang부가 당아 부그디 넘바야 보지 레야가 쳐도 가르쳐 그러지 근데 제도 드니 대강가라 머랍 제말라 레와체 보여 와라 the Rewa Chimbo Yodi Telang Rang Rewala, the Jankama Pakunti Juruba, Sajantana Pe, Janana, Toi Hijimo, Jetin Rinpoche, and Yo, Tende said, Danala, Dukanji on the Pe, Shangat Chimbo, and Pento Chimbo, Unsare, Sombege, the Rewa Yorela, they said, the Kangage, that's Kasusuga Kantutu, they say, Robandavo, Kanto, Jamju Naru Chihui.
My hope, and your hope as well, is that you all be able to practice Dharma. And especially, not only do we need to be able to practice in the present generation, but we also have to create a situation that will ensure that future generations be able to practice as well. For this to occur, we need a foundation, a center, a place where this practice and tradition of practice can be continued. In many interviews, people say to me, how can I ensure that my children receive a proper exposure to and education of Buddhism? In that way, it's evident that we're all quite concerned with future generations. And therefore, I think it's important that we fulfill the vision of His Holiness the 16th Gelong Karmapa, who came here and not only commended the creation of a stupa, but also eventually the building of a retreat center. So, I ask all of you to help to whatever degree and in whatever way you can. So